America needs more scientists because politicians won't listen to them. Comprehensive energy plans are not set in place. Global warming is not addressed. People from all over the world came together to fight global warming. This was called the Kyoto Protocol. One country didn't sign. Guess who that was? The United States. It seems politicians are always arguing about scientific facts. Are you paying attention? We will ask Dr. Michael Weber, esteemed professor at the University of Texas, and learn more about all of these things. You're watching Access News, hands-on news. Access News is pleased to welcome Dr. Michael Weber, public speaker, research scientist, professor at the University of Texas, and recipient of UT's Regents Outstanding Teaching Award for 2011. Dr. Weber, welcome to Access News.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Albert Einstein once said that energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. What is energy?
Energy is the ability to do useful things like work or heat our homes or boil water. And what we do is we take energy from its raw form, which might be sunlight or coal or petroleum, and we convert it into those useful forms. So that's what we do as humans. We convert energy from one form to another, and in the process we get good things out of it, but we also get some bad things like pollution or emissions.
Seems that America has such high energy needs. How do we change energy to meet those high energy needs?
There are a couple things we can do. We could try to use less energy for each useful function by building in efficiency to our homes or to our motors and engines. So we could just try to use the same energy and make it go farther. That's one thing we can do. Another is we can change our behaviors and where we live and what we build so that we don't need it in the first place. So instead of driving cars long distances, we could take trains or buses or other forms of transportation, for example. So we can change how far we make it go, and we can change how much we need in the first place.
That makes me wonder about energy consumption. We really use a lot of energy, especially now during the drought in Texas. We've seen a lot of comments about energy consumption, but we don't see a lot about energy conservation. How can we save energy?
There are a lot of things we can do to save energy. A lot of it includes, in Texas, the built environment, our buildings and homes. We spend a lot of energy on air conditioning, for example. And we can come up with better ways to air condition our homes with more efficient air conditioners. We can insulate our homes. We can get double pane windows. We can do a lot of little things at the home so that we need less energy to keep the home cool. That's the first step. We also drive big cars long distances in Texas. We could consider driving smaller cars shorter distances is another option. And then the third big user in Texas, at least, is the industrial sector. And that tends to be a very valuable use of energy. We use energy to make money, and maybe we can change in a little bit how we use that energy in the industrial sector, but that's the most valuable place where we use our energy.
You know, Albert Einstein said we can't create or destroy energy, we can only change it. So we need to find a way to change the energy into some way that it can be saved and stored. Where do we store energy? Is there a closet somewhere? We put it away? How does that work? Where do we save energy?
We can store energy in liquid fuels, like in our gasoline tanks in our cars. That is a form of energy storage. We could also store energy in batteries, but that's a very expensive way to store electricity anyway. We do it for our iPhones and our laptops and things like that, but it's hard to do that at a large scale because of its expense. But we could do other things that are tricky. We could make ice at night that then cools out our home during the day, for example. That ice would be a form of energy storage. So we can try other new ideas that haven't been deployed yet.
You talked a little bit about big cars using a lot of energy, that kind of thing. Let's talk about electric cars a little bit. What are the pros and cons for electric cars?
Electric cars generally are cleaner at the end use for sure. They're quieter, they're faster, they're cheaper to operate for every mile you drive. So that's the good news. People like them, they're fun. The bad news is they're more expensive to buy up front, and they have limited range. You might be able to drive 40 miles or 50 miles on an electric car before you have to add gasoline or charge it again. And they're more expensive. So you pay more up front to have a car that's cheaper to operate. And for some people that trade-off is easy, and some it's difficult to do.
There seems to be a consensus in the science community about global climate change, that it is happening. But in the political world, it's a huge difference. There's a lot of discussion and disagreement. Why don't politicians get it?
This is a great question, and I'm not sure I have the answer. But I do agree with you that scientists agree that climate change is happening and is caused primarily by forcing from anthropogenic emissions, or man's emissions of carbon dioxide. And I think it's a big concern for the world. I take it very seriously. But there's political disagreement, primarily because politicians who make policy have to choose between winners and losers. And many politicians feel like the losers will be in their district or their congressional representation area. And so that's the challenge, is making sure that whatever policy choice we make deal with the problem without introducing too many other problems along the way.
Speaking of policy, the U.S. has yet to establish a long-term comprehensive energy plan. Why is that?
The U.S. hasn't established a long-term plan for energy or healthcare or the environment or education or even national security. So perhaps this is just one more in a long list of things that we do every 2 years instead of 20 years at a time.
If the U.S. were to set up some kind of policy, what do you think it should look like?
What I would like to see from energy policy is a dedicated, multi-decade effort to reduce consumption per capita and overall. I would also like to see several decades of effort to increase production, increase the amount of energy we produce in the United States while decreasing the amount we consume. And that will help us clean up the environment while also reducing our energy imports and growing the economy. And the irony is, unfortunately, for the last 40 years, we've done the opposite. We've decreased production and increased consumption.
Speaking of the economy, our oil companies in America are making huge profits, billions in profits. Why are they still getting tax subsidies?
We like to give subsidies to the energy industry. Oil gets it, so does gas, so does nuclear and hydro, biofuels, wind, solar, all of them get it. And that's really because the energy industry creates a lot of jobs and it's good for the economy overall. So it's a political favorite. And we have given these oil subsidies or gas subsidies in the form of tax breaks or different treatments for many decades. They're not new. They've been around for a long time, and they're hard to take away. And so rather than taking them away, we just give other subsidies or help to other forms of energy and hope that levels the playing field.
And you bring up nuclear power. We rely a lot on nuclear energy. We have so many nuclear power plants now all over the world that are old. And recently, the situation that happened in Japan almost, was a huge issue with nuclear power. So what I'm wondering is, how do we balance the need that we have for nuclear energy with nuclear safety?
Nuclear safety is a real risk. We have to take it seriously. We also have problems with nuclear with dealing with the waste, disposing of the waste properly. and making sure the nuclear materials and nuclear scientists don't become a source of weapons. So there are 3 risks for nuclear: public safety, weapons, and waste disposal. And in general, if you look at all the people who have died over the decades of nuclear power, it's pretty low, actually. So nuclear is safe in total, but that doesn't mean it's not risky. So we have to take it very seriously. And I think the way we do it moving forward is to invest in the latest technologies. Instead of using designs from the 1960s, we should use more advanced designs that have built-in safety measures. They call them passively safe, where you use gravity and water to take care of your safety for you rather than having an electric power system do it for you. So we can come up with better designs and build those rather than relying on old technology that we know has the ability to fail.
And as you know, here on Access News, we talk a little bit about America's founding documents. So I'd like to take a few minutes now to watch a short video.
Okay.
What is the supreme law of the land? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What is the supreme law of the land? The Constitution.
Thank you for watching Access News. We're here chatting about politics and energy with Dr. Michael Weber, professor at the University of Texas. Carbon is a chemical of life. What is carbon? What is a carbon footprint?
So carbon is something we need. We breathe it. The plants use it. It's part of our life systems. But if you have it in great abundance, sometimes it can do things you don't expect. In the case of global climate change, if you have too much carbon in the atmosphere, it actually absorbs additional radiation from the sun, traps it, causes heating of the atmosphere, which also causes heating of the oceans and the land, and has other effects. And the concern about emitting too much carbon dioxide is, even though it's good for the plants, at the wrong levels, it can cause too much heating, which ends up being bad for the plants, for example. So to make sure we keep all these things in balance and mitigate our emissions as much as we can, so we keep our planet healthy and keep the ecosystems vibrant. To answer the question about the carbon footprint, that's really an assessment of how much carbon each person or each function emits during its processes. So we can think about a day in the life of Michael Weber. I get up, I cook some food, I turn on lights, I drive a car to work, I sit in an air-conditioned environment, and all those functions along the way emitted some carbon in process. And we can add up all those molecules that have been emitted, come up with a tally, and that's my footprint. That's how large of an emissions profile I have for the things I do in my life. And we can do the same thing for different products and different businesses.
What are the ways that we can keep our carbon footprint smaller?
There are a lot of things. So generally the carbon is tied to how much energy we use. It's also tied to the types of food we eat. It's also tied to what we do with land. And so if you clear land, it emits carbon that's stored in the soil. If you burn down trees or forests to make room for the homes you might build, that releases carbon into the atmosphere as well. If you eat a lot of meats, the meat production process emits a lot of carbon. And then if you consume energy, most energy comes from things like natural gas or petroleum or coal that emit carbon when they're combusted. And so we can either use less energy or use less carbon-intensive energy, or clear land less often, or change diets, and do all these things, some combination of them, depending on your lifestyle, to reduce our carbon footprint.
America is obviously not a leader in reducing carbon footprint, right? I'm making that assumption.
That we are the second largest carbon emitter in the world after China. So we have a very high carbon footprint. We're not the world's worst.
Well, that's good. That's one good news.
Right.
So relieved to hear that. What country is leading the way in fighting to reduce carbon emissions?
There are a variety of countries, primarily in Europe, that I think about, that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. They use less energy per person on average than the Americans, and so they have less carbon emissions. And a lot of that's because they have a cultural awareness of energy that's different. They pay attention to conservation. They have higher energy prices, so they use less. They drive smaller cars, shorter distances, and they live in smaller homes that are closer together with higher urban density. So a different structure to the cities and different structure of the countries, as well as a different cultural awareness and higher prices, are a pretty good combination for reducing energy consumption. And just to give you a comparison, if you compare the average Chinese person globally, and the typical Chinese person consumes about as much energy on average as a typical global citizen, a person in Britain consumes twice as much energy per year as a Chinese person. A typical American consumes twice as much energy as the average British person, who consumes twice as much energy as the Chinese person. And the average Texan consumes twice as much energy as the average American, who consumes twice as much energy as the average British person, who consumes twice as much as a Chinese person. And a lot of those people in China and India and the rest of the world would like to consume energy like Texans because we have air conditioning and clean water and a comfortable lifestyle. And this raises a big question for the world. Where are we going to get that energy? And if we do find that energy, will it cause too many problems for the ecosystems to handle it?
That really makes me wonder. Apparently, we're talking about the only form of energy. You're talking about gas in cars and from an industrial perspective. I'm wondering about energy related to water and energy related to food. How does that impact our lives?
Something I look at a lot with my research is the relationship of energy, food, and water. And if we look just at energy and water, it turns out we use a lot of energy for water, and we use a lot of water for energy. About half of all the water that's withdrawn from aquifers or rivers every day is used to cool power plants, for example. And then we use a lot of energy for water. About 10% of national energy consumption goes to heat, treat, and move water. That's a lot of energy. That's more energy than we use for lighting, for example. That's about a third of the energy we use for transportation. So we use a lot of energy for water, which raises this opportunity that if we conserve water, we actually save energy in the process. And if we save energy, we'll save water in the process. So there's some benefits there as well.
What about the relationship between energy and food?
Energy, food's interesting. We use a lot of energy for food. We use energy to grow the food. Things like fertilizers are made from energy to help the crops grow. Then we use diesel-powered tractors and other equipment to reap the food, then process it, then move it, then cook it, then chill it in our refrigerators, then throw it away and take it to the trash dump. And it's about 10% of national energy consumption is embedded in food as well. The sad part is we throw away at least a fourth of our food. Some people say about half our food is thrown away. So that means we're throwing away a lot of energy in the food that we don't eat. It turns out there's more energy in the food we throw away than all the energy we would save from compact fluorescent light bulbs, for comparison. And as a nation, we've pushed really hard to switch light bulbs, but we could save just as much energy just by asking people to eat less food and throw less of it away.
And so what should we do with food? When there's food left over, what do we do with it?
One thing is you could give yourself a smaller portion to start with, so there's less food left over. This has other benefits. It helps with obesity. Obesity is a big public health problem. The other public health problem in America is asthma.
That was my thoughts exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so we have this opportunity. Serve yourself less, have less left over. And if you have leftovers, save them in the refrigerator to eat the next day or take them to a food kitchen or somewhere else. A lot of the food we throw away is perfectly good. We'll always have some food waste because we're concerned about food safety and you don't want to eat food that's spoiled. But most of the food is not spoiled.
What about a compost?
Composting is good if you do it the right way. A bad compost releases methane, which is a very bad climate change gas. And so bad composting is bad for the environment, but good composting is very good for the environment because it takes the food waste and makes good fertilizers for soil out of it. You can also put your food down your disposal and send it to the wastewater treatment plant because the wastewater treatment plant actually collects all that gas and uses it to make energy.
Earlier in the show opening, we talked a little bit about the Kyoto Protocol, where the United Nations, all the other countries came together to fight global climate change. But the U.S. didn't sign the treaty. Why do you think that the U.S. didn't sign the treaty?
I think primarily the U.S. is concerned about international treaties on carbon because we're such a big carbon emitter. And the concern is that we will pay a price and no one else will, or that these treaties will be used to make us poor while making other nations rich. And that's not a very appealing prospect if you're a politician. So it's difficult to sign something that feels like it's targeting us. Now, since then, the world has changed. We're no longer the largest carbon emitter because China has surpassed us. And China, we want to get on board as an international partner in reducing emissions. So it might be there's a different environment in the future for these kinds of treaties.
The Weber Group, named after you, has a lot of different projects and collects millions of dollars in funding. I know one of the projects is called the Pecan Street Project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, the Pecan Street Project is a local private-public partnership. It's a consortium that brings together industry with local government and state government and academia to do research and basically reinvent our relationship with energy. And we're doing the research in Austin, using Austin homeowners as part of the test bed, with a lot of researchers at the University of Texas and a lot of students, and famous companies like Sony and Intel and Best Buy and Chevy, who's making available 100 electric cars for our test bed and for our research. So it's a big research project that a lot of people helped create in Austin, and a part of their research goes to the University of Texas, and a part of that goes to me and my group and my students. I have several students looking at the research there. And what we have is a one-of-a-kind opportunity to look at how people in their homes use electricity, natural gas, and water. And we figure out how they use it, when they use it, why they use it. Then we can come up with strategies to help them save money while reducing their consumption and reducing their impact on the environment. It's really the biggest experiment of its kind in the history of the world.
Wow, I know you're a big advocate of energy conservation and making sure that we do make better use of our energy. I'm wondering, as an advocate, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of different perspectives. How do you convince them to change their mind, change their heart on these issues?
There's a lot of steps we have to take for conservation, and sometimes the first step is education and awareness, understanding how much energy we consume, which many of us don't understand. So I try to do my part by educating as many people as possible, by answering questions, by teaching courses to the public. I have students who go as volunteers to local schools and speak to teachers and students, a couple thousand students over the last couple of years, to teach them about energy. So we start by educating. Then we try to come up with good ideas and solutions to save energy. And then we try to explain to people that in the process of saving energy, they don't have to give up on their lifestyle. They can, in fact, improve their lifestyle, have more money, and have cleaner air to breathe, which is good as well. So we try to explain that there's a lot of cross-cutting benefits for it. It's not just about doing good for the environment. It's about doing good for humanity and yourself and for the economy and making yourself more comfortable at the same time. That's what I believe. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Michael, for being with us here on Access News.
That's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You can learn more about the work of Dr. Weber at his website, weberenergygroup.com. And you can also ask questions, share your comments and opinions on our website, accessnews.us. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. One beautiful thing about America is that we, the people, have power. The more we know, the better decisions we can make. For Access News, I'm Tamara, and that's Austin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure talking with you. Appreciate
Executive producers Devorah Ben-Moshe, Ken Hurley. With funding from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation through the Knight Community Information Challenge. Supported by the Austin Community Foundation, fostering philanthropy in Austin for 35 years. The Austin Community Foundation, for now and forever. Created and written by Devorah Ben-Moshe, Ken Hurley. Hosted by Tamara Suiter-Ocuto. Interpreter for Tamara Suiter-Ocuto, Jennifer Stoker. Crew: Producer Linda Latowski, Director Editor Orlando Lopez, 3D Animation Doug Gray, Technical Director Carla Saldana, Director of Photography Brian Blake, Assistant to the Producer Susan Harper, Original Music Aaron Jake, Camera Doug Gray, Tim O'Neill, Ross Wilsey, Production Sound Mixer Rod Simonson, Teleprompter Operator Brandon Taj Mora. Additional crew: photographers Eve Granick, Devor Ben-Moshe, intern Brandon Taj Mora, additional interpreters Jacob Stacy, Tracy Hughley, Jessica Graves. Website developed by Electric Leaf, Jonathan Braden. Closed captioning provided by CPC, Closed Captioning and Subtitle Services. Signing the preamble and the First Amendment, Casey Ketchum, Tanner Ketchum. Coached by Mindy Moore. Special thanks to Susan Murnett, Lisa Williams, Mary Ben Ramsey, Monica Williams, Janice Kelklar, Paula Lang, Jeff Garvey. Claire Bugan, Bobby Guerrera, Russell Harvard, Cynthia Foss, Bill Stotesbury, Caitlin Mack, Yitzhak Ben-Moshe, Bobby Nord, Kenneth Gladish.
Hi, I'm Tamara, host of Access News. Join me as I talk with renowned scientists, community advocates, powerful business leaders, and politicians from both sides of the aisle. Join me and Professor Michael Weber from the University of Texas when we ask, can his science get through our politics? Join me each Sunday at 1 p.m. on KLRU Austin for Access News, hands-on news.